Good morning, ladies and gents. I appreciate it's a bit early in the morning, but this has been playing on my mind a little bit. Um, this is just going to be to prove that I can do serious. First off, I'd like to say a very big thank you to all our customers that have shown a lot of patience and been waiting for me to give them a ring, check up. I will be coming in touch with you and ringing you just to ensure that we've got all your details correct, because there's become apparent there's a couple of email addresses that aren't right. But basically, I just want to explain the reasons behind why we're shut and the thought process that led there. If I do anything, I like to try and do it to the best of my ability, and that means I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do the best job I can. I'm going to take the advice of the professionals, and I'm also going to take the advice of our professional bodies, which are the British Girls Grooming Association, the British Dog Groomers Association, and the Pet Industry Foundation. The advice of the latter two at the moment is that ultimately the decision is going to be down to the groomers, whether they're open or not. The British Isles Grooming Association they believe that all groomers at the moment should be closed. I don't want to start a debate or dispute or get at loggerheads with anyone. It's been quite upsetting for me seeing the ambiguity that's been put out there, because there's still a lot of holes in the government legislation. I say legislation, not the legislation. The legislation is quite clear, but in terms of what they're actually putting into place, it's not all fully up and running yet. I get a lot of messages off of the groomers. We try and help out where we can with them and the advice, and we've also been sharing information around on the local on the local pages as much as we can in relation to what's going on, who's entitled to what, because it's stuff that we've all had to look at for our staff members, as well as what we need to know for ourselves as business owners. The shutdown that came, there is ambiguity, and I know groomers have been getting different advice between whether they're closing or whether they're allowed to stay open, under what circumstances. And the advice they're going to the councils, and it's still coming through from councils, MPs from the same party even, are offering different advice to where we're going. On a personal level, when this first started coming into play, the procedures that we have in the salon, because of the way we work, there was very little that we had to add to that to make sure we complied with all the restrictions that were being put into place with the coronavirus and social distancing, washing hands for customers, etc. That didn't take us a lot to do up. As I say, my personal view, and I don't particularly want to get into opinions, but from my background and the way we look at risks, or I was taught to look at risks, was not just the immediate risks, but how you react to those risks and what that's going to leave you in a position to be able to do in the future. I'm sure Dog and Bone is going to survive in one form or another. It may not be on the same level as what it's doing at the moment, and I truly and sincerely hope that all the groomers and not just the groomers, but all the local businesses around us can get through this. And just very briefly on that point, I'd say when all this shit is over, try having a look at your locals where you can, rather than the big boys, because the big boys at the moment, yes, I appreciate they employ people, but they're getting a lot of revenue, and they will be seeing an advantage obviously in their sales as people are stockpiling everything. Coming back and touching on the groomers, I can fully understand those that are facing the financial situation they're in for the first time. It's very scary. I've been there. Due to my health, I got put in a position where I've got no money coming in at all, with nothing off the States a few years ago. I'm not saying it was easy, but we managed to get through it. But what is hard is when I see people berating and saying, are you sure that's, they're just stopping open, they're making money whilst nobody else is. The trouble with the dogs, I would say 99% of the groomers, there's very, very few groomers out there who'll be doing it to make money off the back of it. The majority of groomers that I speak to and have contact with on a daily basis are passionate about what they do. And when we have conversations, it can sort of get across the line between personal and business. and they say, oh, you should keep the two separate. With the dogs not being a commodity, with them being a live, breathing, sentient being, the passion for looking after those dogs, because it's personal, it's going to cross over into the business side of things. We do what we do because we care on whatever level, and the passion it is leading to arguments between the grooming community as what we're doing. Grooming, to my view, is a welfare necessity. If it's not going to have the impact if you don't do it in the same way as some other things do. And this is where it started forming part of the process, where we would, I was in a position with do or don't I, and then this is where it went, and my thinking, taking that step back and putting my, I say, sort of scientific head, judgment head, and analytic head on. What led us to the decision was, I'd got staff members who were in the at-risk, or were living with people who were in the at-risk category. As the legislation stood at that time, there was no fallback for them to have or to stop working. If they'd just stopped working and gone off on leave to reduce the risk to members of their household that were in those serious categories, as the legislation stood at that time, they would not have been entitled to pay, and that grieved me. That didn't sit easily with me. My other concern was before they announced the lockdown, the criteria for the pay for employees under the furlough scheme was that they had to be laid off due to a slowdown in business through the coronavirus. Before the lockdown, before we actually had the lockdown, we had got our books filled, especially on the mobile side, until the end of the year. So I couldn't argue the toss that, I was having to say to people, go home because we haven't got the business. People have stopped coming to us. We are still getting phone calls from customers whose groomers are shut, and I've got to a point now where for new people, I am not answering the phone. I'm sorry, but we're getting too many inquiries, and it's hard. I appreciate you want to look after your dogs, but I'm getting tired of saying, look, no, sorry, but this is the position. So that now is the recorded message on the phone. My regular customers, if you need to contact me, that's not a problem. Just leave a message, but I'm doing the usual thing of just checking the phone at the end of the day. The other part of we've closed before, as I say, before the lockdown, we were finding the bits and pieces and gaps, and being a bit of a pessimist, I was looking, because my view with trying to find the gaps was, how are we going to possibly fall foul of this, and how can I ensure that A, we get through it, and B, my staff still get paid and are still in a job at the end of the time period. So because of where we were going with that, my team members were put on annual leave, so they'd still got an entitlement to pay, which was fortunate, although it wasn't an ideal situation, because if they'd have gone on unpaid leave, they immediately prior to the scheme and the lockdown, they wouldn't have been covered for the pay. Thankfully now, Boris mentioned the lockdown, the advice from our professional trade body overnight is groomers are supposed to be closed. Boris did his announcement as well, and for me then, although I could quite happily sit here and argue that due to the hygiene measures that we've got in place, it was probably a lower risk for dogs coming in than it was if you were going to the supermarket and touching the bits and pieces round there. The country advice, if you like, government advice is non-essential business is closed and stopped. The advice from my professional advisory body was they thought we ought to be closed. Monday evening, from that point of view for me, it was a hard decision in respect of, my first thought was, what about all my customers and what about my dogs? Welfare issues and all the rest of it. And I thought, but then sort of sitting down then, once I'd sort of got over the shock of the initial the initial announcement was, if you just find the essential side of it, I know there are those of you that are out there through either the physical size of your dogs, if you've got sort of arthritis and sort of conditions like that, you rely on us to do your dogs and your brushing out for you. Other than that, the majority of my customers out there, especially if they're on lockdown and they are stuck at home, what sort of puts it into perspective for me is if you've got your brushes there, you know how to use them and you can brush your dog out. As long as your dog's being brushed and the coat's being maintained, that coat will do its job. They're going to get to a stage where they're going to get long, they're going to get to a stage where they're going to get shaggy. But if as long as you maintain that coat from a welfare point of view, then we should be okay. I mean, obviously I can't cater for every circumstance, but that's what I used as a reckoning for the essential. We then look at the vets and the fact that they've shut down for everything other than emergency cases. So if you've got the vets doing that as well, that was the decision then, right, we're closing. It's, there's no whys and wherefores, it's shut, and we will be closed regardless of what any other MPs, until there's a consistent line saying that we can open safely, not just from like 50% of the experts, but a higher percentage than that. And I'm afraid we're going to be closed. We're going to be closed until such time as we get a good consensus, strong opinion that it is safe for us to open. There are some very good groomers around this area. I know all the qualified ones and they're in the same position as me. I also know that there are some that do grooming as a hobble, and I know there's a lot of people that will go to them, and I am not going to knock their skills or the reason behind what they're doing. The only thing I would say is if you are going somewhere else because you want to do what's best for your dog, and I appreciate that, and I've never had an issue with people going to other groomers because they've had to wait for a turn with us to get in. Dog's welfare, that's the first thing that I'm concerned about. All I would say is if you are going anywhere, think about your drive there and ask yourself that question, whether it's essential under what's going on at the moment. If you are getting to that groomers, have they got all the bits and pieces and the absolute 100% hygiene measures in place? And the other thing is are they a member of one of the professional organisations, and have they got the relevant insurance to be doing what they're doing? And as I say, it's, please don't take that as a knock, because there's people out there that have obviously got to make the decision based on their circumstances and what they're looking at going through. And it's, I can't sit here and judge because I don't know where they're at. I know what my circumstances are. I know that for the next 3 months now, because of the steps we've put in place, if needs be, I'm hoping it's not going to be that long, but I've got my staff bills covered. Yeah, hard times. But really, just what I wanted to get across was, I don't want to see the bitchiness. I want to see everybody stay safe. And I obviously want what's best for everybody's dogs. If people want to message me, I've put a guide on the page for brushing out and where you can get tools for. Some of the companies online are still operating, that's not a problem. But what I'd say is please check if there's any inquiries for the grooming. As I say, the girls are off on annual leave. So they're not annual leave now, I'm sorry, they're furloughed now. The furloughed side of it's actually kicked in. So what I'm saying is I'm quite happy being here if anybody wants to message. All I would ask is that, in view of the number of messages I am getting through Facebook, I'm trying to take advantage of the time to spend with my family. My wife's frontline NHS, my youngest son's he's at home with me during the day. So yeah, basically that's the reason where we are, that's where we're at, and hopefully we'll see you in one form or another when we're out the other side. Take care now.